presentation of the resilience resource of when crisis hits home. We're grateful to be partnering with Fill the Needs to put this on for everyone. And so, welcome. My name is Scott. My wife is Josie. We're from the Resilience Resource. We founded the Resilience Resource in 2020, and we are an organization that meets people's needs around crisis in three ways. We do a lot of equipping and prepping and resilience building on the front end before crisis happens. We do a lot of care and toolbox enhancing in the midst of crisis, and then we do crisis care afterwards as well.
So it's just a privilege to be here with you all tonight. I've got an invitation from Amy a couple of days ago to consider collaborating on this webinar, and have worked with Amy and Fill the Needs in a collaborative way through a couple of different community crises, and we're just grateful for this opportunity. So I just want to give Amy an opportunity to introduce herself, to share a little bit about Fill the Needs and maybe some of the projects that you're doing right now or spearheading right now, and then we'll dig into our content.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Fill the Needs does a lot of disaster relief, and a lot of our relief is done remotely. It allows us an opportunity to truly get boots on the ground, build networks, and meet the needs of the people in the immediate moment. We tend to deploy the first 2 to 3 weeks after a major crisis, and then we stick around and help and support our network partners. And Scott and Josie have been network partners for years, and one thing that we have learned is there is a tremendous need for mental health and personal, even for first responders, that self-care. And oftentimes, everyday people can be first responders in a disaster, and we're not always taught the tools that we need. So we thought, we at Fill the Needs thought this would be an excellent opportunity to give people the tools that they need to help respond and take care of themselves so that they can take care of others after a crisis. Right now, Fill the Needs is working here in New Orleans on assisting people who were impacted by the terror attack on New Year's, also in California on the fires, and we're still actively working in Western North Carolina after the hurricanes. So hopefully what we learned today can not just help us today, but it can help us for the long term as we are managing our communities and ourselves after disasters. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for sharing, Amy. Like I said, it's just been a privilege to work with you over the past couple of years, and you just do such an excellent job at bringing people together and building those collaborative efforts that really benefit communities, not just in the United States, but even involved in some other areas around the world. So thank you for that.
So we are going to introduce a couple of guys that I'm really proud to be associated with. Two of our team members are going to give you the content for this webinar. Gary is a 22-year veteran of the Colorado Volunteer Fire Service and a veteran of the U.S. Navy. He's a current hospital chaplain and continues to serve all of northeastern Colorado as an adjunct chaplain. We've known Gary for a very long time, and we're a part of his team to help set up a chaplain team for fire in the Northeast Colorado region years ago. Ron Fiegler has served for 25 years as a member and supervisor of professional fire rescue teams with Denver Fire. Ron holds a Master of Divinity in Chaplaincy and a Master of Arts in Counseling. And Ron is a critical incident stress management instructor and teaches courses all the time. He's also a member of the American Academy of Experts in Trauma Stress. So hopefully just from those little bios, you guys understand how lucky we are and how qualified these guys are to speak on what happens when crisis hits home, because it's hit home for them quite a few times.
So part of why we're putting this webinar together is because I've been hearing in various communities that we've provided care for. Questions like, how can I effectively support my community? What do I do when the crisis does come to my own backyard? We often fall into this assumption that crises are going to happen over there, kind of wherever over there happens to be. And then when it hits in our own community, we find ourselves often scrambling for resources. So this is part of that preparatory toolbox piece, to just help to identify what the impact of a crisis in your own backyard can be on you, what it can be on your colleagues, your friends, your family, some ways to help when you have identified some of those impacts occurring, and then kind of some ways to consider how to build resilience, how to recover, how to move towards recovery, and move towards recovery not in a way that denies the impact or minimizes the impact or brushes past it, but acknowledges and validates how challenging it can be to move in and through crises with resilience, and how to come together as a community to just remember that we all go through crises. And when we go through crises together, then our recovery is that much more restorative. We can help each other out along the way. So we're going to pass this off to Gary at this point, and he's going to start to dig into a bit of the concept of trauma, and just unpacking what it is, and what are some common reactions to traumatic events.
Amen. Hello, everybody. What I want to try and give you guys in my pieces are some the best tools, the best things I have to help give you some landmarks that as you go through life, that you'll be able to use as kind of guide points for dealing with some of the hard stuff that life puts on us, crisis, trauma, all those unexpected things. That's kind of a long list, but life's like that. And the things I want to offer you today are things I've seen really do the most good for folks, both as a firefighter, as a pastor, as a chaplain, help folks kind of locate themselves on where they are in their life and kind of which direction to go. So this slide here, what is trauma and what is crisis? They get confused sometimes, but basically a trauma, a whole body response to stress that overwhelms our ability to cope and continues after the danger is past. And whole body meaning physically, emotionally, psychologically. There's reactions that come from there in the first few seconds of a trauma, of a crisis, of a situation, and some of those things can linger on. The lingering part is where the word triggers come into it. Something happens to us and it's a thing we just can't seem to forget, or we see a certain color vehicle, a certain color of hair, smell a certain thing, hear a certain song, and it's like we're right back there to that uncomfortable place we were in that crisis, that event. And that's what I mean by triggers. Our initial automatic responses, by initial, I mean that first third of a second to a whole second time in our mind where we figure out something's going on here and what do I do, that kind of startle expectation. A lot of times that's where the fight or flight reactions come into, the freeze or the fawn over things. We're going to gear up. Our mind has recognized something's going on, and so our emotional system and chemical systems in our brains and bodies jumps in and gets us ready to do something. Our physical self changes. All of those things happen. We realize, hey, something's going on, and sometimes that those reactions, we want to fight and do something about it, or we want to just run away from it. We even if we freeze or those kind of things, sometimes that's just right in the moment. But once we get our head about it, and especially if we've been trained or through some stuff like today, we'll start to move away from those and start doing different things, different behaviors. The other part of trauma is the residue of a traumatic event, particularly on those triggers and those things that remain, can kind of harm our sense of safety, our sense of ourselves, who we are in the world. We might notice afterwards we got a little bit of difficulty regulating our emotions. And those things lead kind of to one of our best indicators that something's going on with us, and that's navigating through our relationships. A lot of times I may think I'm handling something just fine, but I've been married 49 years here, and just the look from my wife or her questions to me lets me know that I'm coming across in a different way than what I think I'm portraying. And so a lot of times when those stressors in our relationships come up because of what we've been through, that's valuable things to pay attention to, because a big part of building our resilience is awareness and knowing what's going on in us and in other people to be able to do those things in a positive way. The definition of what is a crisis, the key part of it, a crisis is one's reaction to an event. It's not the event themselves. Uh, it's not what happens to us that counts, says old little Epictetus. It's what we think about what happens to us that count. Big thought there, you know. Two people could be in the same room, could be in the same family. They could experience the exact same event. For one of them, it will be a crisis and they'll feel the need to do something about it, or they'll not know what to do about it. They'll feel a need to react, and another one will not. And to them, it won't be a crisis. So it's a pretty large window here. But the key part you want to know about a crisis is not the event. You know, something may have been a traumatic event or a crisis event, but that's not what makes it stick to us. What makes it stick to us is what's going on inside of me as an individual. The trick to both of those is recognizing in yourself or others when a crisis is happening. You know, when you're in that altered state, or you've got that tunnel vision, or you've got that sense of I'm not, something's here, or the hair standing up on the back of your head, those kind of things. To be able to recognize that, and just in recognizing it on what's going on, you're able to react and respond more in a beneficial way. That's the point of resilience training, of crisis training, is to know when something's going on, and the quicker you do that, to be able to take control of yourself in that place and employ tools or philosophies or ideas that help you put those things in perspective and do what has to be done next in a beneficial way. That's a big piece of what today's about. Simply being aware of these things and other landmarks that we're going to give you that you'll learn today tend to insulate you, gives an insulating factor within you, so that the next steps ahead put you a few steps ahead of what's going on in your body. You know, your mind knows what's going on. It can kind of regulate your body. Maxim I picked up here, golly, 15 years ago or so, was that the body will not go to where the mind has not been. The body will not go where the mind has not been. We will, if we've thought about something, if we've imagined a thing, if we've wondered what would it be like if I was ever in that situation, our mind is going there. And just the fact that we've thought ahead about these things makes us better to be able to react in the moment when something may startle us and our body may want to ramp up because something's going on. But if our mind's already gone there, then we're more prepared for that. The next thing I'm going to be showing you on the next slide is a couple of 5 different worldviews that we have of how life goes on. And this is really going to explain what causes some things to be a crisis for me and not for others. This is going to explain a little bit of why I would get overwhelmed, maybe to the point of homicide or suicide or despair or revenge, a number of different things. This little slide here changed my life a great deal. It's pulled from the words of or from the world of kind of first responders, but the folks I've talked to in chaplaincy work and counseling work, we all have to deal with these different things. A worldview, if you will, if we're looking at navigating through our life, worldviews are going to be the mountaintops. 3 or 4 or 5, you know, a small number of things that you believe this is how the world works. This is why I'm here. This is what's supposed to be like. This is how my world is structured. That's what our worldviews are. And it should be pretty steady, but when they get shaken, we lose direction, as you can see. So these 5 worldviews, as we go through them, kind of imagine if you get into something and this is the way you think the world is, and all of a sudden in that crisis moment, it's presented to you that the world is not this way. You can imagine the feeling and the angst that would give to you rather than kind of thought through these things beforehand. First one is a violation of the belief that the world is just and fair. I wish it was, but 69 years, come to realize that it's not always going to be just and fair for me or for anyone else. The second one is a pretty big one: guilt and a violation of one's sense of self-esteem or character. In other words, who I think I am. A violation of my sense of who I am by not having done something I should have, or by doing something that I should not have done. Think of the anesthesiologist that would forget to check what his patient's allergies were before he went into that operating room. To have done something you shouldn't have done, or to forget about doing something that you should have done, that is one of those worldviews, kind of invincibility. I'm always going to do the right thing. When this happens, I'm going to always do the right thing as a father, fulfill my role in whatever my vocation is. But we're fallible. We may get through life doing almost everything right, but none of us get through life doing everything right. The third one is abandonment, betrayal, or other deep violation by a parent, a family member, a trusted friend, a spouse, an institution. Betrayal and abandonment are huge in our lives by people that we trust. We can unpack that quite a bit, but just take that for now. Fourth one is a violation of the sense or of the world being a safe place. It's a little bit different than justice and fairness. This is of my world being safe. What's going to happen when I walk out my door? Am I safe to go out my door? When that gets shown to be different, whether through what happened in New Orleans, what's going on in California, what's going on in any place around the world, just about, our world gets shaken. And the fifth one is a violation of that sense of coherency that holds my world together. For some, this is the area of faith or religion, some kind of spirituality of the cosmos, of the universe, how things work. For some, it's a real scientific, factual-based glue. But when that gets shaken, then that rocks our world, and we get opened up to some of these post-traumatic symptoms that normally wouldn't have affected us, that I could usually get through it. But when this significant piece of how I believe the world works, when that mountaintop gets obscured and I can no longer know which way is north or south in my life, then we've been impacted. And there's things we should do for that. To end this part, the quicker we make peace with these things, the better. And remember, our body's not going to go to where our mind hasn't been. This came from an awesome book on how to deal with hard memories. And if you're going to have to be dealing with your memories, it's nice to know that we can control a little bit of how we package those memories. We can control what we do with them from the very beginning, or we can go back to them and we can adjust them from my life's perspective today. And just remember these three things before we have to change gears here. Remember, truthfully, our stories, our memories get awful large. We add meaning into it, and we add judgments into it, and we add our future into it when an event happens. And we add why this person did it. We attribute motives to that, and it makes that story and that memory awfully big. But if we've got to go back and start working on this one thing that happened in our life, we want to limit it to just the facts. This is what happened in New Orleans on that first day of the year. This is what happened. For the fires in LA, I don't know who said it, why, I don't know what's going on there. This is what happened. And it makes our window much smaller to have to deal with. Remembering so as to be restored, to be restorative, rather than for vengeance or hatred, those kind of things. And then the third one is just to remember with curiosity that we may not have the whole thing right, or if we do have one of our worldviews shaken, and all of a sudden our faith is what a crisis of faith, or what we believe science would answer for this kind of a thing. Be curious about that. It doesn't mean we have to throw away a whole worldview. We can take and we can fit this new experience into how we think the world runs, and either adjust our life, or we could maybe find a completely new, different scheme of making sense of things. But these three things on dealing with traumatic memories are life-changing. So that's all I got to say about that. Do you guys have anything to add to that before we get into common reactions and things like that?
No, that's just so good, Gary. And I think especially your point about memories and remembering restoratively. I mean, that's a really important part of survivor-centered crisis care is as you're coming alongside somebody or if somebody's coming alongside of you to help you understand the events that you've experienced or understand your reactions to those events, that is best done in a safe way, being a safe person for another
Amen.
or having another be a safe
Amen.
person for you. And that allows you to process through those experiences in a way that can lead to restorative recovery. When we process through those experiences in ways that we don't feel safe, that can actually add layers to the trauma that we've experienced.
And I would
Amen.
add to that, if you're a survivor, if the crisis has hit home, there may be a lot of people who come to you and want to unpack what happened. And some of those people are going to be safe, and some of them you're going to feel like, I don't know. If you have that feeling and that check in your heart that says, I don't know if this person's safe, yeah, have a 30-second elevator speech ready to go and just give them that and walk away. You don't have to get into it with everybody. Not everybody is healthy.
The Resilience Resource supplies a field guide for survivor-centered care, and the first section of this little work is all about what you need to be if you're going to be that one listening to people's stories, and if you're going to be the one wearing the helper hat and trying to go and take care of folks, whether they're the folks you work with or whether they're your family. You don't want to do. You want to be the best you can. You don't want to do harm. You don't want to inadvertently say some things that are so common for us to say. But anyway, that's a resource that you'll find in your material there. So let's talk a little bit about common reactions and trauma. Here's a few good things to know. You've already heard some of these concepts come up. Anytime we're talking about critical incidences or trauma or crisis, you're going to hear about their intensity. Half a state being on fire or somebody driving down a road and hurting people on purpose. Those are extraordinary events, extraordinary nature. So we want to pay attention to that component. Things that overwhelm our regular ways of coping. Boy, I used to be able to just shake things off, but this thing's not shaking off. We want to pay attention to those kind of things. Disruption in our functioning. Yeah, concentration things, sleep disturbance things, smells that I don't like anymore, all of those kind of things. Those are the nuts and bolts of the reactions, quite normal. All of those can be manifest in any given person about at any given time. You may be having physical symptoms or mental or emotional or spiritual or interpersonal, but the terms I try to apply to my old age and the old age of folks I meet that are older, particularly in a hospital setting, is it seems like you're demonstrating a lot of grace and class as you go through this hard time. Keep doing that. Grace and class for yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. Treat yourself like you should treat yourself. And same with others, grace and class. And that seems to get us through a whole lot of things. The other presenters got things that you've seen quite common on how they react or things that help or hinder?
Well, signs and symptoms is a really broad category because it's like human beings are like snowflakes. Everybody's heard that. There are no two who are alike. And that's why it's so important to spend some time in understanding the person you're with. If you're with a stranger, it can be very difficult. A quiet person may be normally quiet. A noisy person might be normally noisy. So it is very difficult. What I'm saying is be careful about jumping to conclusions too quickly. You got to give it time and listen to people.
I would say even in addition to, you got to know yourself too. A huge part of resilience is, like you said earlier, Gary, is self-awareness. And so to know how this is my normal, this is my baseline. I normally eat this much, but for some reason I'm starving all the time. There's a change there. And when you see changes, whether it's like that or whether it's I'm not hungry and I haven't eaten for 3 days, when you have changes in your baselines, those are things to pay attention to. Those are signs and symptoms.
And as an additional part of that, and we'll talk maybe a bit more about this a touch later, but the things that used to help, if there's been a shift in the things that were beneficial for you in just caring for yourself, the ways that you used to be able to re-regulate after something distressing had happened. We all have our different kind of coping mechanisms. So when those coping mechanisms are overwhelmed, like Gary mentioned, that disruption of coping mechanisms or disruption of normal functioning, that's something to pay attention to. And oftentimes we do kind of feel that maybe external pressure to kind of get back going again, or be productive again, or push through whatever it is we're experiencing. But if we can slow down and become aware of how our whole system is responding and identify some of those common reactions and symptoms, then we can start to assess what's going to be most beneficial. And it might be things you've used in the past. It might be new tools that you need to add to your toolbox. Totally okay. It's not a failure. It's just a normal shift in the rhythms of human life. And different things are going to be effective in different seasons.
So the next slide here is one of the ones that I appreciate the very most in some of my training with the Critical Incident Stress Foundation. If you take a normal life, this is a little picture here. The timeline is going from left to right, from kind of a baseline of this is where I'm at today, normal life, this is where I'm usually at, and a stressful event happens. There's kind of three different categories that we can group people and how they're going to react to that. The first category, they come to this stressful event, and instead of disruption or distress, they just keep on trucking. They've learned something, they've been raised a certain way, they belong to a certain culture, maybe even a certain nation, that when these kinds of things go on, it is not a disruption. They take them, they understand it, and off they go. For some people in Louisiana to move to Alaska, there's probably going to be some stressful events happen that you're going to be impacted by, but the rest of those folks, the blizzard and the cold and the sun never going down, they're not going to be impacted to them at all, even though there's significant influences in their lives. So that's kind of the one group. This resistance can be thought of as immunity created in us by the things we do. I'm going to call that proactive resilience. There's things we can do that we have done, maybe just because of who we are, where we live, what we've gone through. But there's also things we can purposely, intentionally add to that create resilience before anything ever happens. Those worldviews I shared, where we see them and we go, oh, I've never thought of that before. And we start to think about that's proactive resilience. We're doing something on the front end so that when that thing happens, it's not as bad as it would have been. That's one category of folks. Those are the things that proactive resilience are all things we do before something happens. Kind of the second group and the largest for us is if you go down and you hit your stressful event there on the red letters and you drop down into disruption or distress at some level, there's kind of on the heavier dotted lines there, the partial recovery, the full recovery, and the new balance. That second category, there's distress there, but it's signified usually by it's short-lived. It doesn't extend for a long time. This is a gradual rebound, if you will, from the incident where behavior health returns to close to what we were before pre-incident levels. Just like there's things we can do before an event happens, there's things we can do afterwards in the midst of stress management tools, breathing and grounding, those kind of tools. Again, those are also very well explained in the field guide. So that's an awesome resource to have close to you. But then there's those things we do afterwards. That's the reactive resilience piece. I've been through something, I've experienced this, I've learned from it. And chances are the next time it comes around, I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to kind of know, oh, and one of my big things is when I'm impacted by severe things, I tend to walk slower. I just slow down on purpose. And so now I've come to look at that reaction as a time for me to, as a strength, I can compose myself. I can think what I'm going to have to do. So those are things that happen afterwards. And the third group, of course, this would be the smallest of the group. This one's characterized by an inability to do what we have to do. Maladaptive coping. People describe themselves as devastated or crushed. Maybe years after the event, they describe themselves, I was never the same after that event. And they mean that in a negative way. Work gets impaired for this group. Marriage relationships are strained. And understand, there's 20% of folks or so that's going to, at any given time, have some residual that they need to go through, and they need to deal with that event a little bit deeper than other things in their life, or deeper than other folks go through. That's good. 80% of us, things are going to happen to us, and we're going to witness something or be involved in something. And 80% of us, whether we do anything about it or not, we're probably going to be okay at the end of that. I'm just going to read this a couple times. Just take it in. Believe this. It is the stress surrounding meanings, the interpretations we make, and the beliefs, our worldviews, and our core values that we assign to stressors, trauma, tragedy, sickness, that are then obsessively repeated. This is, I call this worry-warditis. We just go over things over and over again, and we replay the tape. That is doing that links adverse events to adverse reactions. Let me read it once again. It is the stress arousing meanings and beliefs that I assign to what happens to me. And then I reinforce that. I relive it. That's what causes this event to be adverse in my life. This one came out of the Second World War from a man who was a prisoner of war in one of the prisoner of war camps, and survived to talk about it. You that know who Viktor Frankl is, you'll know his story here. But he observed this: everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Whenever we are no longer able to change the situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. We can control how we remember it. We can control the meaning and the we assign to it. We can change those things as we grow and we get a little bit wiser, and we can look at ourselves hiding under the bed when the thunderstorm came and go, I don't need to do that anymore. I know what thunder is and where lightning comes from. I can leave that behind. We can't change what happens to us, but we can change how we're related to that story, to that event, no matter what it is.
I think we'll go ahead and hand it off to Ron to talk a bit through stress management. We've got about 15 minutes left and want to make sure that we can cover some of these practical stress management tools. So thanks, Ron, for unpacking that for us.
Well, no worries. We'll unpack what we can here. What you're looking at is a slide that represents one model of how to manage stress in your life. And so we'll jump right in, because this is actually a slide at the beginning of a 16-hour training session. So we're going to boil that down into, I'm probably going to take about 18 minutes, but we'll see. All right. So try to stick with me and just know that we're just giving you a surface view right now, but we're talking about the how-to right now. How do I do exactly what Gary just read about? How do I change myself or help other people change? All right. So there are many different formulas for managing stress, and I'm just going to cover one, and even that very briefly. So take a look at the field guide, and you'll find enormous amount of information on how to put together a plan that could work for you. All right. So this model uses what we call 7 C's, just as a good memory grid. All right. So take note up at the very top there in that red arrow, you'll see check and coordinate. It's the first of the first two C's of the 7 C's. Okay. It deals with assessment and safety. Check and coordinate also appear, if you'll notice, in each of the other 7 phases. So I think these 7 phases work for me really well, because I picture it kind of like the spokes in a bicycle wheel. All right. They do work in sequence, just like spokes do, but they always are in support of each other with the ability to move between the spokes and phases with the weight. All right. So that's what we're going to do. We can always assess for safety and survival needs at each and every phase. So check and coordinate are the first two C's, but we're always coming back to them and always using them in every phase. So as we discuss stress, though, remember, and Gary kind of mentioned this, that the stressors, even trauma-related stressors, they're not really the main problems. The real problems are the meanings that we intuitively, unconsciously even attach to the stressor and what it means to us. And that, and combined with your personal strength or weakness of your current coping skills, will determine the effectiveness of how you manage stress. All right. So I like to think of this kind of like a bodybuilder, as we speak in terms of whole body self-care. To grow strong muscles, a weightlifter's got to rest like 48 to 72 hours between workouts and eat nutritiously in order to cope with and to heal the damage that was caused to the muscles. Okay, so it's the same in what we're doing here with mental health and spiritual health. After exposure to a mental or spiritual stressor, especially of a trauma nature, we need to cope well. We must rest. We got to ruminate in healthy ways and not intervene or interrupt our brain's natural ability to heal itself by coping wrong, drinking too much, or something like that. Okay. So the intent is this of any stress management model: it's to discipline yourself to apply survivor-centered care. Okay, as a kind of as a workout routine is the way I look at it. So no model is perfect. Different weightlifters use different routines to match their individual traits, their individual bodies, their needs, and mental resilience is similar. So find something that works for you. So stress and coping, that pretty much just sums up life, doesn't it? I mean, we encounter positive and negative stressors every single day. We're either being overcome by stress or we're successfully managing life stressors and growing even stronger. So there are three primary tactics, in my view, as to how to manage stress. We strengthen ourselves or the person we're trying to help. We manage the immediate stressor environment. And we can compartmentalize the stressors, break it down into recognizable parts so that one bad event doesn't derail the train. We may not be able to eliminate the entire stressor, but we can maybe eliminate one part of it. So this model that we've looking at, that 7 C's model, is called stress first aid by the military. And it's not new. It was first designed about 20 years ago by a collaboration between Navy medical and mental health professionals, the Marine Corps operational leaders, and religious ministry professionals collaborated to put it together. And it's even been improved through the last couple of decades with good feedback. All right, so let's jump right in. You'll notice that it is a multi-phase sequential model. We begin with assessment, that's the check and coordinate, and we always are mindful of doing that as we go along. But we have to do accurate assessment. If you misjudge what's going on, or if we jump in too soon, we probably won't do any good and we might even do harm. So to be clear, we're always assessing, checking and coordinating at each phase at all times. Then we move to the next group, the primary aid phases of cover and calm. So most of us will remember hearing something about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't even know how to say it, but people literally, for example, that can't deal with things like self-esteem related concepts like competence and confidence, which is later on in this model, can't deal with that when they're at the point of fearing for their safety. When the shooter or the hurricane is still active, when the threat still exists. So we must first ensure safety and meet the basic survival needs of food, rest, and water. And this is what we mean by cover. Be aware that making people safe is not enough, though. They must feel safe. Perception must match reality. Even if someone's safe, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to be able to hear you help them move on. All right. Now, in the secondary phases, we are looking at connect and competence and confidence. It's the last three of the 7 C's. So we shift focus at this point on helping people to build self-efficacy. Let's call it hope for our purposes. This is where we learn that we actually can grow our trauma carrying muscles and we can control our reactions. So first we connect. People simply do better. To me, this is the most important of the final 3. People simply do better when they're connected to others with the support of a team or a family. So whether we're helping just ourselves or with other people, we need to comfort people, comfort ourselves, talk ourselves down. It's so important to reduce alienation and isolation, both real and felt. So ensure the support of other people. And next we look at competence, which is enhanced through 3 pathways: social skills, occupational skills, and well-being skills. So in short, competence can be learned and improved because it's a skills-based concept. In social skills, what we do is we seek to enhance our relationships with family and friends. People usually get worse in isolation. Not that time alone isn't important. I know I take time alone, but we need to be with the people we love and the people who support us. In fact, did you know that solitary confinement is considered among the most severe and counterproductive punishments in prisons? Most states and many nations, along with the United Nations, either fully prohibit or severely restrict the use of solitary confinement. It actually tends to make behavior worse, not better. Humans need others to help be more competent selves. And then in occupational skills, functioning is the main target when we're looking at working in competence. We want to help people function better. So just be aware, sometimes someone's career might even be at risk when they're failing to properly cope with stress overload. Okay, and well-being, this is important as well. It kind of refers to the problem solving, our mental and physical fitness, and managing the trauma and loss reminders. So kind of like, as we mentioned earlier, managing the stressor environment and compartmentalizing. So if we don't care for ourselves, we simply won't remain competent. So this is the area where you see people start to drift. All right, we get too busy to work out, we get too busy to eat healthy, we get too busy to sharpen our skills. So we get complacent, we ride the wave of status quo, okay? And it's easy to do. Or maybe an injury in life can shatter our desire or ability to care for ourselves, and we just lose the good habits. So it's important to not drift. Stay alert, and stay disciplined. Fitness in both body and spirit and mind are important. So let's always keep in mind this is a whole person concept. So we've all seen people just give up, haven't we? You know, the hoarder, laziness, drinking too much, and one of my downfalls, too much ice cream. But we have to take care of ourselves. So why do some people end up here and other people recover? Well, part of the answer, I think, might be in the quality of our self-care, our skills, and our ability to solve problems. So we'll finish this slide up talking about one model I use to help solve problems is the SMART model. And pretty popular one, people have heard about it. SMART being an acronym, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So specific means that your goal has to be well defined. And measurable means if you can't measure your progress, let's be clear, that's not a goal, that's a wish. And achievable, your goals have to be within reach and within the limitation of your resources and your strength. And that's got to be relevant. Your goals have to relate to your life, your work, and your purpose. And to me, this is the most important one for making it work at all, is you have to have a deadline to your goals. And it's the one that most people forget. Okay? A goal without a deadline is not a goal. It's just a wish. You're hoping something will happen. But if you put a deadline to it, you can adjust as you go, but at least now you know whether you're making progress. So problem solving and self-care skills are a huge part of competence. All right. So that's it. That's 16 hours worth of training. All right. This is your survivor-centered care using the 7 C's model, and there are others. So experiment with it and get your own bodybuilding routine going, one that fits you. All right. So the ultimate goal, as you can see in this slide, is to build a new internal paradigm of hope. It's kind of as the old proverb says, as a person thinks in their heart, so are they. So the goals really, as we've kind of been talking, they're really quite simple. First, we ensure an atmosphere of safety, basic needs. Then we prevent further harm. We teach and we foster healthy coping skills as a way of life, not just when we have a reaction to a critical event. Yeah, that's important, even if you haven't prepared for it. But if you prepare, it really resolves a lot of issues before you even ever have them. Okay. So it really is, as Gary just read with Dr. Frankel's experiences, it's absolutely amazing what a human being can survive and use to thrive when we prepare and persevere properly. All right. All right. One way of becoming more resistant to stress, building up your whole person body armor, is to build up immunity. And Gary mentioned this too. Build up our immunity to stress and trauma. And we do that through our intentional stress management tactics, like the ones we just talked about. And what this does is that it instills hope, almost subconsciously. Okay, you'll find many tactics and other ideas and all kinds of suggestions in the field guide for survivor-centered care. And the word hope, I looked it up, and the word hope appears 11 times in the book. Hope is crucial to surviving trauma and incorporating trauma and loss into our life in a positive way towards post-traumatic growth. You know, you can't just go on with life as it used to be. It's not as it used to be. This trauma experience is now a permanent part of the rest of your life. One trauma doctor that I know well words it this way: you can never unsee what you've seen. You just have to deal with it. And so all of these tactics that you'll find in the book are very, very helpful. They help facilitate an abiding sense of calm, both in the moment of crisis and in our daily stress management. An abiding sense of calm comes only through preparation, daily, weekly, and monthly routines. So I encourage you to find and develop your own routine. So thank you very much for listening. And may the peace and protection that comes from an intentional life of self-care become yours.
We had 2 questions submitted with the with the registrations. We answered one of them, I think, pretty thoroughly. The other one is a fantastic question, and I don't want to skip over it before we wrap the webinar. But this question was submitted. It says, how do I know which crises are mine to care about? We've got wildfires in California, genocide in the Middle East, war in Ukraine. All of these crises are competing for my attention and my heart. To ignore any of them feels heartless, but to care of all of them, for all of them, leaves me useless, empty, and paralyzed and overwhelmed. So what do we do with our global news while we're going through our own crises?
Well, the reality is we are at it more so than any point in history faced with an overwhelming amount of information where we have access to parts of the globe, news from parts of the globe that we've never had access to before. And statistically, research shows that if you have any kind of personal connection to a location and there's a crisis occurring there, it's going to increase its level of impact on you. So if you visited there, if you have friends that live there, if you follow somebody on social media closely that lives there, you're going to feel that sense of personal impact. And it is going to feel like an added weight. And what we can emphasize is there's an understanding that those common signs and symptoms can occur for you as you watch the news in similar ways to even going through a crisis. There's an aspect of kind of vicarious trauma that can happen there. And so being really intentional about identifying and being aware of the responses in your own system, applying some of the tools that Gary and Ron have so effectively unpacked over the past hour is really helpful. And being really intentional about considering what you can practically do. So what can you practically do in your immediate environment? We can be spurred to action by the news of these different events and crises happening around the world. And there's things that we can practically do in our immediate environment and to connect to those crises that are maybe a bit more removed from us. So there's ways that we can help. Everybody can do something. And it might feel like your something is too small. No action is too small. No way that you can help is too little to make a difference. As Amy can well speak to you, when all kinds of little actions come together, big things are accomplished. But it takes somebody saying, what can I practically do in the immediacy of my location, as well as to support something that might be happening on the other side of the world. And that might be donating time, that might be donating funds, that might be elevating that event through communication, through advocacy. There's all kinds of different practical steps that we can take that are helpful responses to crises. There are also steps we can take that aren't so helpful, that can be a bit of a drain on the resources of different organizations. And there's a lot of good material out there on some things not to do in response. Maybe at some point we'll have to do a webinar on that in the future, in ways that you can practically help other orgs that are responding. And also weighing the amount of information you take in, being intentional about stepping out of the news cycle. The news cycle is set up and structured to keep your focus and to suck you in. And it can steal your energy and it can steal your hope for what's in your here and now. And so being intentional to step away, focus on the relationships that are in your immediate proximity, and focus on the things that you can practically do, the next best thing you can practically do.
But it is okay to turn your phone off and focus on what's right outside your front door.
Thanks so much, Ron. Really, and Gary, just really appreciate your wise insights and speaking from your depth of experience. We began the the webinar talking a bit on the just kind of response side for, what somebody might be presently experiencing, and ended with just such important points about preparation and what we can do now to build our toolbox, our resilience toolbox, for when crisis might hit home if it hasn't already. So just really appreciate your thoughts and tools that you've provided us today. If you're looking for further tools, of course, there's access to the field guide for survivor-centered care, and I popped the link in the chat. And the Resilience Resource also leads a 2.5-day training that is specifically designed to help prepare you and members of your community to be able to face crisis with resilience and with a mindset of hope. The 2 training dates that we have coming up in 2025 will be held in Edinburgh, Scotland, where my husband and I have the privilege of living. So you get the opportunity to come and visit us if you attend that training and explore this amazing city and amazing country. We're hoping to have some dates in the US in the summer, but those are TBD. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and close our time together. Just a reminder that the recording and these resources that we posted in the chat will go out via email. And if you have any questions, if you have any concerns that pop up, if you just feel like you need to talk a little bit further with somebody, maybe one-on-one, please reach out via our email at info@theresilienceresource.org, and a member of our team would be happy to get back with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Feel the Needs. We really appreciate everybody for showing up. We'll see you on the next one.